Hi guys and girls. Tonight we wander somewhere older than time and softer than dreams. A place where hours were made of sunlight and nobody had invented Mondays yet. If you're cozy under covers or wrapped in the noble robes of insomnia, welcome. Push that like button before your eyelids press themselves. Let's drift gently into the fog of the very beginning, or rather, the space before beginnings needed dates. Long ago, long before watches beeped and calendars screamed their deadlines at us, time was measured the way clouds are counted in the sky. Not very precisely, often wrong, and occasionally not at all. The earliest humans watched the sky, noticed that the moon had a habit of shrinking and swelling like a self-conscious balloon, and someone, somewhere, likely said, "Hey, maybe we should write that down." If this anonymous ancient timekeeper didn't get enough credit, well, we'll grant them some tonight. Thanks, O Forgotten One, for noticing the moon does the same thing more or less every 29-ish days. You gave people something to work with. Welcome to the beginnings of the lunar calendar. The Babylonians, an enthusiastic bunch with a flair for cuneiform and sandals, thought the moon made an excellent timepiece. They tracked her every mood swing with neat wedges carved into clay tablets. 12 lunar months, each with 29 or 30 days, gave them a year. A little too short, mind you. A lunar year has about 354 days. And as anyone who's ever been late to a party by 11 days knows, that's enough to cause trouble. But the Babylonians had a solution. Every so often, they just added a month. Surprise 13th month, they'd say, probably with more ceremony. Think of it as the leap year's quirkier cousin. Not regular enough to be predictable, not rare enough to be magical. It was calendar improv, and somehow, it mostly worked. Then came the Egyptians, who said, "What if we stopped moon watching and just let the sun do the job? He's always there, loud, hot, reliable." And so, the solar calendar got its golden hour. The Egyptians created a 365-day year with 12 months, each 30 days long, and then, because math rarely matches reality, they tacked on 5 extra days at the end, likely for partying, resting, or watching cats reenact government functions. These bonus days weren't counted as part of any month. They just floated there at the end of the year, like an after-dinner mint you didn't technically order. The Nile still flooded close enough to when it was supposed to, and life more or less marched on. And then, cue dramatic music played on a lyre. Rome entered the chat. Ah, Rome. The city where togas met bureaucracy. The fast-paced empire where one poor sop messing up the calendar could get someone else executed for planting wheat in January. Their calendar started as lunar too, courtesy of Romulus, the mythical founder and mild overachiever. His calendar had 10 months, and then about 61 days of awkward nothingness stapled onto the end of winter. No names, just cold and confusion. For Romans, winter was a liminal time, possibly used to file taxes or fend off invading neighbors by throwing snowballs. As you are probably now sleepily thinking, wait, 10 months? Then why is October, which means 8, the 10th month? And you are correct, dreamy listener. That's because the Roman calendar was eventually padded with more months, January and February, by an update no one asked for, thanks to King Numa Pompilius. He was the second king of Rome, and likely the first to say, "I just don't think this calendar feels complete." Numa added those new months, but as with any software patch, it was glitchy. Months were odd lengths, days were mysteriously assigned, reassigned, then reassigned again. Priests called pontifices were the only ones allowed to declare the start of a new month, meaning time itself became a political tool. Imagine waking up one day and being told it's not March after all, it's still February, and don't ask why, but your rent is now late. Things got messier, time got warped. Historians look back at this period and squint, trying to remember what year was supposed to be what. Imagine the whole world running on a calendar made from string, chewing gum, and urgent prayers. So what did Julius Caesar do when he got tired of all this temporal chaos? But that is a story for another evening. Chapter 2: The Moon's Mischief and the Ancient Counting Game. Once upon a tender yesterday, roughly 30,000 years ago, give or take a mammoth migration, humans began looking up at the moon not just to wonder or to howl, but to count. The moon, softly changing shape like an ethereal jelly bean, became humanity's first calendar. Each silver cycle, new to full to gone again, was a prompt, a tick, a tock, a gentle celestial wink saying, yes, time is still happening. You see, the moon had a habit of being dramatically punctual. Every 29.5 days, there would be the reliable arrival of full moon glow. It was comforting in an otherwise uncertain world of saber-toothed tigers and suspicious berries. So naturally, early humans did what humans do best. We tried to organize it. We began drawing crescents on bones, carving time itself into femurs and antlers, as if the universe were a very moody arithmetic problem. Some of the oldest known calendars are these carved bones, like the famed Ishango bone from near the Nile, dated around 20,000 years ago. A baboon fibula adorned with neat notches. Not the most glamorous timepiece, admittedly. No alarm function, no moon phase complications. But it made for a trusty reminder. Time passes, and we are here to notice. Now, whatever organization our ancestors attempted was soon disrupted by what I affectionately call the moon's little joke. Months do not divide evenly into years. 12 lunar cycles make about 354 days, while a full trip round the sun is roughly 365.25. A cruel mismatch, like socks from two different laundromats. This, dear listener, was the beginning of the first great temporal wobble. People built calendars that followed the moon, but seasons began to slip. Harvest festivals showed up in winter. Winter solstices got suspiciously sweaty. It was chaos, but very polite, ancient chaos. Like hosting a dinner party when no one knows what time to arrive and everyone brings lentils. Enter the Sumerians of Mesopotamia, quite fond of orderly things, clay tablets, and the number 60. Around 3000 BCE, they helped formalize timekeeping in ways both brilliant and bonkers. They gave us 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour, a system borrowed from their base 60 math, which is what happens when you let ancient accountants run wild. The Sumerians also kept lunar calendars, but even they struggled to make moon months and sun years shake hands like old friends. Every now and then, they'd toss in an extra month to patch things up, a decision made by royal astronomer priests, which sounds like a stressful job involving star charts and seasonal guesswork. They'd say, squinting at Venus. I believe it's time for an emergency February. This practice was called intercalation, or as I call it, the ancient art of calendar duct tape, a brilliant short-term fix that naturally got a tad out of hand. Soon, political leaders began deciding when to insert extra months, often to extend their own rule. Why end my term this spring, they mused, when I could simply invent more winter? The sun, meanwhile, couldn't care less. It marched on steadily, absolutely not invited to these lunar shenanigans. Fields bloomed and withered according to solar schedules. Livestock cycled through their own internal almanacs, and human planners kept furrowing their brows. During this time, Egyptians, those sun-loving sand enthusiasts, chose to rebel. They noticed the annual flooding of the Nile was more sun-like than moon-like, so they built a solar calendar, 12 months of 30 days, plus 5 bonus days at the end. Imagine it, an ancient cosmic music festival at year's end. 5 whole days off the books, no responsibilities, just snacks and sphinxes and solar satisfaction. Of course, that too wasn't perfect. 12 months of 30 days makes 360, still a few days shy of a real solar year. But if you're going to be inaccurate, you might as well do it in a way that aligns with pyramids and sun gods. So what we had was a planet spinning, the moon misbehaving, and civilizations scribbling furiously, trying to keep up, like students in a long overdue group project called time itself. And yet, despite all the lunar oddities and calendrical clumsiness, people did manage to survive. They planted things, they celebrated solstices, they danced under full moons and blamed eclipses on hungry sky serpents. Generally excellent behavior. Time was slippery, yes, but we were nothing if not determined to measure it, tame it, stack it into useful piles. As night stretches on and stars take their sweet time blinking, we drift gently toward the next curious chapter in our sleepy saga. The moment when Rome decided to reset the cosmic clock in a fit of imperial efficiency, or stubbornness, or perhaps both, wrapped in a toga. Turn over your pillow, dear dreamer. The calendar tinkering is just beginning. Chapter 3. The Moon's Mischief and the Lunatic Month. Ah, the moon. That glowing marble of mystery, just hanging there like a soft, celestial nightlight. For centuries, if not millennia, people looked up at the moon and thought, you know, this thing seems pretty good at keeping time. And thus began humanity's long romance with the lunar calendar. A love affair filled with poetry, confusion, and the occasional bureaucratic breakdown. Long before clocks ticked and Google Calendar prompted us to attend meetings we never wanted to join, people simply watched the sky. It was free, infinitely vast, and, the best part, didn't require Wi-Fi. The moon had her stages, and she showed up on cue, rippling through cycles of silvery fullness and subtle slivers. From new moon to nude moon, that's when she disappears, she moved with dependable flair, about every 29.5 days. Ah, the half day, the great historical troublemaker. Now, if you were in charge of measuring time back in, say, ancient Mesopotamia, you'd notice quite proudly that you could fit about 12 of these moon cycles into a solar year. Brilliant. 12 moons, 12 months. Let's pop some barley wine and call it a day. Only, here's the snag. Those 12 moon cycles clocked in at about 354 days. And as some attentive goatherd soon discovered, that's roughly 11 days short of the solar year, which meant that, over time, the calendar started acting like a sleepy traveller at a train station, lagging just a bit behind schedule. Spring festivals began slipping into snow. Harvest feasts arrived when the crops were still hugging their seeds. Religious holidays wandered around the seasons like lost pilgrims looking for the correct equinox. Behold the lunisolar dilemma. Now, a few civilizations got clever with this. The Babylonians, those stargazing wizards of the ancient world, looked up, did some merchant-grade math, and said, let's just add an extra month here and there, like a bonus track on a celestial album. And they did, periodically inserting a 13th month called an intercalary month, a name that feels unfairly long for a solution that was intended to make time easier. Determining when to insert this cosmic curveball was less scientific. Early methods often involved priests priest dreams, or the alignment of stars and sheep entrails. Whatever the method, it boiled down to an irregular rhythm. Time is a circle, they said. No, the calendar was a wonky polygon with occasional bonus points jammed in. Meanwhile, the ancient Egyptians, not ones to be outdone in the realm of celestial organization, they did, after all, build giant triangles just to impress their gods, opted out of moon watching altogether. To the sun, they cried, slathering themselves in optimism and palm oil. They created a 365-day calendar, extremely modern for the era, complete with 12 months of 30 days each, and a sassy little 5-day holiday period at the end for good measure. It was sort of like the ancient version of a work sabbatical, except instead of yoga retreats, everyone drank beer and worshipped Ra. But back in the Levant, the Hebrews continued with the lunar calendar, as did early Islamic and Chinese cultures. The moon was too poetic to give up entirely. Who could resist its silvery charm and dependable waxing? Yet no amount of moon literature or star charting could solve the great dissonance. The lunar year simply didn't keep pace with the solar one. And the more humanity tried to synchronize birthdays, harvests, and holy days, the more the moon seemed to laugh in its quiet, reflective way. Always there, always wrong, like a friend with excellent intentions and terrible GPS. The ancient Greeks, as you might expect, tried naming and reshuffling things. They gave us Meton of Athens, a mathematically minded man around the 5th century BCE, who noticed that every 19 solar years lined up quite nicely with 235 lunar months. And thus, the Metonic cycle was born, a sort of celestial peace treaty between sun and moon, forged in symbols and star charts. Still, for the average sleep-deprived farmer in Boeotia, this didn't make seed sowing any easier to plan. The moon giveth, and the moon taketh away. And so, the world became a patchwork of calendars. Moons counted here, suns tracked there, months that started only when someone sighted a crescent on a clear evening, which was a real bother if you lived somewhere foggy. But hope, dear dreamer, was about to dawn in the form of Roman ambition, the kind of ambition that doesn't just split hairs, but names entire months after emperors who could barely count past LXXX. And so, as the moon faded into history's background glow, we drift toward the rise of a calendar so bold, so inconsistent, it would enrage astronomers, and eventually be corrected by a pope. Chapter 4. The Day the Sun Misplaced, Tuesday. If you've ever lost your keys, your phone, or your sense of purpose in the produce aisle, imagine how the ancient world felt when time itself started slipping through their hands, like sand through an open hourglass. In this chapter, dear listener, we drift gently to the amber dawn of the Roman calendar, where emperors, priests, and the occasional goose collectively misplaced about 3 months of history, and a few Tuesdays too. Now, settle in. The journey to temporal tranquility begins in ancient Rome, around the 8th century BCE, where Romulus, the mythical founder of Rome and enthusiastic wolf baby, crafted one of the earliest Roman calendars. It had 10 months, that's right, just 10, with zero interest in winter. Winter, apparently, was not worth counting. Romulus simply ignored it, like an unwanted invitation to a cousin's poetry recital. This early calendar began in March and ended in December. You know, December, from Latin decem, meaning 10. Ever wonder why September means 7 when it's our 9th month? Blame Romulus. Not the entire fall of Rome, but the calendar confusion. That's on him. The missing months? Well, there was nothing. From December to March, the Romans just freestyled. There were no official months, just a frosty fog of untracked time. Imagine living through a 2-month stretch of existential weather with no name. A sort of temporal purgatory where the only things reliable were the chill and an overcooked lentil stew. Thankfully, along came Numa Pompilius, Rome's second king and patron saint of awkward systems. Around 700 BCE, he decided winter deserved some respect, so he added 2 more months, Januarius and Februarius. January and February. In fact, January was named for Janus, the two-faced god of doorways and transitions, perfect for a month that bridges the invisible gap between one year and the next. Who better to mark the unknown than the guy who looks both ways before crossing a metaphysical street? But here's where it continues to get wonderfully illogical. The Romans still couldn't get the days to quite fit. Their calendar had 355 days, leaving about 10 days adrift from the solar year. Like a drunken sailor trying to dock with a lighthouse, they just kept missing. So what do you do when your calendar doesn't match the seasons? Easy. You invent a backup month. Say hello to Mercedonius, a delightful intercalary month squeezed awkwardly between February and March whenever a Roman priest thought it was time to recalibrate. Yes, a secret bonus month. Not every year, mind you. Only when the Pontifex Maximus, Rome's chief priest and part-time bureaucrat, decided the math was off. But this was no exact science. More often, it was politics. You see, adding a month could extend a politician's term, or delay elections, or simply make festivals line up with slightly less embarrassment. In short, Rome let priests adjust time like seasonal furniture, move it around when it got in the way. And what about poor February? It often took the brunt of these calendar shenanigans. With a dwindled stature of 28 days, February got the short end of every revision, like an odd sock in the laundry basket of months. But as charming as it sounds, throwing months in and pulling months out like a game of temporal hopscotch, it led to chaos. Farmers planted crops at the wrong times. Festivals bloomed in the wrong seasons. And worst of all, birthday syncing became truly unbearable. By the time Julius Caesar returned, from gallivanting around Gaul, he found Rome's calendar lagging behind the seasons by 2 whole moons. Think of that. Christmas in October, strawberries in January, March Madness in July, utter disarray and not a Google Calendar invite in sight. But don't worry, Julius had a plan, a very Roman plan. Which brings us to a new calendar, a borrowed Egyptian trick, and a year so long, the Romans called it Ultimo Gigante Anno. Or, well, we just made that up, but it was truly huge. For now, rest easy, because the calendar crisis is about to meet its match. Let's close our eyes and gently drift from the shifting sands of ancient months to the marble corridors of a very determined Caesar, who was about to turn chaos into chronology. Chapter 5. The moon's mood swings and the lunacy of the lunisolar calendar. Settle in now. Let your breathing slow, the day dissolve, and your mind unfurl like papyrus under a desert moon. Tonight we drift into the dusky glow of ancient skies, where the moon wasn't just a celestial flashlight. It was, for a time, the whole wristwatch. Long before atomic clocks or missed Zoom meetings, early humans looked up and said, "Ah yes, that bright floaty orb is shrinking again. Must be time to plant the barley." And thus, the moon became our first timekeeper, elusive, poetic, and wholly unreliable. The earliest calendars were lunar. Each cycle, new moon to full to new again, was fascinatingly consistent, like a song with no chorus but plenty of drama. Roughly 29.5 days per lap around the Earth. so clever civilizations began counting those moon cycles to mark months. More moon, more month. Easy. Except, no. Cue the rise of the ever-polite yet devastatingly impractical lunisolar calendar. This little beauty tried to compromise with the sun. Imagine the moon and sun in couples therapy, politely accusing each other of messing up dinner reservations. Except instead of a therapist, the ancient Babylonians were sitting there with clay tablets saying, "Can't we just have both?" A lunar year had about 354 days. A solar year, roughly 365. We modern folks shrug that off as whatever, 11 days-ish. But to ancient farmers, priests, and the always anxious royal astrologers, those 11 days were like a fire ant in your sandal, small, persistent, and ruinously annoying. After a few years, festivals like the spring planting celebration started happening in midwinter. Imagine decking the temple for the harvest festival, only for your olive trees to snidely inform you they weren't even pregnant yet. So ancient cultures invented what might be history's coziest chaos button, the intercalary month. Ah yes, the bonus month that was occasionally tossed in to realign the moons with the seasons. Like a sock drawer that won't quite shut, you just jammed in a little extra fabric and hoped no one noticed. The Babylonians were early experts of this strategy. Every few years they added a 13th month. Not a spooky Friday the 13th situation, more of a surprise extra birthday party energy. "Oh, another month? How charming. Shall I continue paying temple taxes for that too?" said absolutely no one with enthusiasm. Yet it worked, sort of. The system depended on the whimsy of royal astronomers, who, rather gloriously, might wake up one morning and declare, "The moon feels moody today. Let's pop a bonus Adar in the calendar." Adar, for reference, was the last month of the Babylonian year. If it had a personality, it would be that teacher who never grades papers on time but passes everyone anyway. This system, both brilliant and baffling, was adopted in some form by other ancient cultures: the Chinese, the Hindus, the Hebrews. A chorus of civilizations all trying to sing along using slightly different sheet music. Some even used different versions of the moon. Yes, you can imagine the international scheduling nightmares this created. The equivalent of ancient diplomats showing up to meetings 12 days early with burnt offerings and puzzled looks. And yet, in its sleepy way, the lunisolar calendar brought us a delightful philosophy. Time is not a straight line. It's a circle, a spiral, a slow dance of shadows and sunbeams. For a moment in history, the moon held sway over both months and moods, calendars and crops. It didn't need efficiency. It had elegance. Still, not everyone agreed. Over time, murmurs arose from mathematicians and rulers. Must we rely on a celestial body with commitment issues? They wondered, brushing lunar dust off their sundials. The idea of stability, predictability, and maybe even a year that didn't require seasonal guesswork began twinkling on the horizon. It wasn't rebellion, just a gentle, sleepy yearning for something simpler. And so, dear dreamer, we prepared to drift into a world where emperors get involved in clockwork, where math meets monarchy, and one Julius decides the moon has had quite enough screen time. Close your eyes now. The moon will still be there in the morning, changing its shape without asking permission, as it always has. Let's turn the page, softly, toward the next moment, when time tried once again to grow up. Chapter 6. The month named after nothing in particular. Let your pillow grow heavier, your blankets warmer, and your grip on linear time looser, because tonight we drift into a month that nearly didn't exist. A space in the calendar so aimless, ancient Romans once shrugged and said, "Well, we'll figure it out when we get there." We're talking about February, the oddball, the squinty-eyed cousin at Time's family reunion. And once upon a very confusing time, February wasn't even February. In the early days, long before leap years and Gregorian fixes, the Roman calendar didn't quite know what to do with winter. The first Roman calendar, traditionally attributed to the mythical King Romulus around 753 BCE, had a mere 10 months, March through December. You might notice that's only 10. That wasn't an oversight. They simply ignored winter. Why name a month if you can't harvest grapes or wage wars in it? That meant about 61 days were left unaccounted for each year. Days that floated around like socks lost in the laundry of time. The Romans, pragmatic when they weren't being superstitious, just let those 2 orphan months bob around in the temporal void. This calendrical silence stretched from December to March, and no one really tried to name it. Because again, it was winter, and Romans weren't fond of updating spreadsheets when it was cold. Then came Numa Pompilius, a king whose name sounds like a sneeze, but whose impact was anything but slight. In the late 700s BCE, Pompilius decided that having a calendar that ignored 2 whole months was perhaps not very kingly. He added January and February, and voila, time had 12 boxes instead of 10. Naturally, they placed February at the end of the year. That's right. Back then, February was December's quieter, gloomier caboose. January and February wrapped things up, not started them off. That makes sense when you think about it. Let the old year fade out in fog, frost, and philosophical reflection. But despite its inclusion, February clearly wasn't given equal status. It had an awkward length, 28 days, and on leap years, 29. That confusing extra day only shows up roughly every 4 years, like a shy groundhog with a math degree. You might wonder, why was February given the short end of the stick? Well, early Romans believed even numbers were unlucky, so they tried to make every month an odd length, 29 or 31 days. Except of course their calendar math was about as precise as a fork in soup. The full lunar year is roughly 354 days long, while the solar year, the one we use now, is about 365.24. So trying to squeeze a solar year into 12 oddly numbered months with round preferences and superstitious reluctance to even numbers, that's like trying to build a sandcastle with a colander. Eventually, the months were distributed mostly evenly, but February still got left holding the unlucky numbered bag. Tradition, superstition, and perhaps bad timing doomed it to 28 days. Why tack the leap day onto February, and not a more popular month like May, you ask? Likely because adding a day to the end of the year was easier, and we're betting no one wanted to mess with May. Yet for all its humble size, February carried a lot of responsibility. In ancient Rome, it was the month of cleansing, from the Latin word februum, meaning purification. The festival of Februa was held on the 15th, full of ritualistic scrubbing and spiritual dusting. So while February was short, it was symbolically mighty, a kind of purgative pause before spring popped back with blossoms and voting assemblies. Still, the math never quite added up. Despite Numa's efforts, the Roman calendar remained stubbornly out of sync with the sun. By the time Julius Caesar strolled into the picture, the calendar was over 2 months off kilter. Imagine planning a summer wedding, only to realize it was still technically spring and snowing. Not great for togas. But don't fret, Julius had a plan, and it involved hiring Egypt's top astronomer, postponing religious festivals, and tacking on more days than a CVS receipt. But before we witness Caesar's caffeinated calendar reform, rest in the misfit month of February. It's a little short, a little strange, and not quite understood, even by time itself. Let your thoughts meander as the ancient Romans once did, gazing up at chilly February skies, unsure of what day it really was, but certain they were late for something. And as the night folds gently around you, we'll glide toward the great imperial pivot, the moment when time itself will be put under new management, and February will watch from the sidelines once more. Chapter 7. The Midnight That Never Was, a nap through the day that didn't exist. Let's breathe slowly now, because things are about to get a little dreamlike and delightfully inconvenient. Imagine, you crawl into bed on the evening of October 4th, 1582. You fluff your pillow, yawn politely, and drift off into a nice, velvety Renaissance slumber. Only when you awaken, something is unmistakably missing. No, not your socks, although those do tend to vanish mysteriously. What's missing is the entire next day. October 5th never happened, nor did October 6th or 7th or the 8th. Poof, gone, swallowed whole by the quirks of human-made timekeeping. This wasn't a hallucination. You really did just sleep straight from the 4th to the 15th. Congratulations on your record-setting nap. Pope Gregory XIII says you're welcome. Why? Well, don't fluff your blanket too frantically. We'll go slow. You see, by the late 16th century, the Julian calendar, that grand old system we met earlier, courtesy of Julius Caesar, had lovingly lumbered along for over 1,600 years, but it had a tiny, almost imperceptible flaw. It was just a bit too generous with its leap years, treating itself to an extra day every 4 years with the enthusiastic confidence of someone who doesn't know what moderation means. This sliver of an error, a mere 11 minutes and 14 seconds per year, doesn't sound like much. It's barely enough time to prepare a cup of tea and regret a decision. But over centuries, it piles up like dust behind a bookshelf. By the time Gregory and his mathematicians sat down with a calendar and a sigh, they realized the seasons were wandering. Spring was no longer springing on time. Easter, the holiday whose scheduling might as well have been pulled from an alchemist's hat, had slowly drifted far from its intended celestial spotlight. Something had to be done. Enter the Gregorian calendar, a name that screams humble innovation and papal rebranding. Gregory's team, led by Alicius Lilius, sleepy-sounding name, excellent credentials, proposed a fix so elegant and bizarre that only humans could have thought of it. First, they chopped out 10 days like a barber, giving time a sudden fringe trim. In Catholic countries, October 4th just tiptoed off the stage, and the next day was renamed October 15th. If you had a birthday in there, tough brioche. No party for you this year. But more than just a temporal pruning, the Gregorian reform redefined the leap year formula. From now on, a year would be a leap year if divisible by 4, unless it was also divisible by 100, unless it was also divisible by 400. If that sounds a bit like a riddle spun by a sleepy librarian, well, it kinda was. So the year 2000 got to be a leap year. But 1900, sorry, not this time. Time had rules now, complex ones, European ones. Back in the 1580s, however, not everybody was thrilled. This was more than just theoretical time travel. In Spain, Portugal, and Italy, devout Catholic nations, folk simply sighed and skipped ahead with obedience and mild grumpiness. But in Protestant regions? Oh no. The Pope fiddling with the calendar was about as welcome as a raccoon at a royal banquet. In England, they scoffed at this popish nonsense. "Give us our days back," cried no one officially, but quite a few unofficially, probably while eating cabbage. Meanwhile, Germany was so theologically tangled that some cities adopted the calendar and others didn't. Across borders, neighbours would argue about what day it was, which sounds like the start of a very sleepy sitcom. And here lies the oddly comforting truth. For nearly 2 centuries, large chunks of Europe were living in entirely different timelines, separated not by oceans or distances, but by mathematical opinions and theological pettiness. If you mailed a letter across the channel, who knew when it might arrive? It's as though humanity had blundered into a fictional kingdom, ruled by the House of Complicated Tuesdays. You might think such a grand reform would have global appeal, but no. The Ottoman Empire stuck with their lunar calendar, thank you very much. Russia, meanwhile, said "niet" to the Gregorian system for another 300 years. By the time they switched in 1918, they had to skip 13 days, making way for the most delightfully awkward Valentine's Day in history. So cozy in, dear listener, because the story of time is not finished meandering. We've tinkered with the calendar, shaved off 10 full days, and still had to argue about Easter like it was a new moon secret. But what happens when the world tries to standardize time itself? Not just days, but hours. Well, that ticking tale awaits in the land of railway timetables, missing noon bells, and clocks that refuse to agree. But for now, trace a finger through the mist of those missing days, and let time quietly carry you forward. Chapter 8. The Moon's Terribly Inconvenient Schedule. Long before wristwatches and Google calendars ruled our hours, time was a far more celestial affair. It lived in the skies, danced with the stars, and had a most inflexible roommate, the moon. Tonight, we are lighting a soft candle in the shadowy archives of lunar timekeeping, a romantic, but frankly, exasperating chapter in our sleepy saga about calendars. For while the moon may charm poets and tide charts, it has no interest in making months fit neatly into years. You see, in the earliest days of civilization, when sandals had no arch support and mathematics was still learning to walk, humans looked up at the moon and thought, yes, that shiny thing, that'll tell us what time it is. And so began our long and complicated relationship with lunar calendars. Think of it like trying to build a clock using jellyfish. This moon-based method made a certain soothing sense. After all, each month had an obvious structure. The new moon arrived like a mysterious dinner guest, cloaked in darkness, slowly revealed itself in slices, waxing crescent, half, full, and back down again, until it disappeared, perhaps out of embarrassment. Ancient cultures, from Babylon to China, to the earliest tribes along the Nile, created calendars that worked like this. Count the moons, mark the events. A month was about 29.5 days. Logical, lovely, lyrical, but not exactly practical. Because here's the problem. If you take 12 lunar months, 29.5 days times 12, you get 354 days. The solar year, however, that good old trip around the sun, takes 365.24 days, which means that if you followed just the moon, you'd lose nearly 11 days every year. Over time, your spring festivals would slowly tiptoe into winter, and eventually you'd be celebrating harvest season in February, when the only thing growing is frostbite. The Babylonians, bless their mathematically gifted socks, were among the first to notice this cosmic discrepancy. They invented a clever system involving occasional intercalary months, aka randomly shoving in an extra month now and then, like an unexpected second dessert. Every few years they'd announce, "Surprise, we're doing a 13th month." Everyone grab a sheep and a scroll. It wasn't elegant, but it sort of worked. Meanwhile, The ancient Egyptians learned their rivers didn't care much about the moon at all. Their flooding season came from solar cycles. So in a moment of practical genius, or perhaps mild exasperation, they quietly began shifting to a solar calendar. Their solution? Just pick 12 neat 30-day months, slap on 5 bonus days at the end like a year-end clearance sale, and call it a trip around the sun. The moon sulked, but the floods were impressed. Other cultures responded to the lunar-solar mismatch in a variety of creative, occasionally absurd ways. The ancient Hebrews developed a complicated metonic cycle, a majestic 19-year structure that dropped in 7 extra months at mathematically determined intervals, like a magician pulling calendars from a hat. The Chinese did something similar with their lunisolar calendar, politely harmonizing moon months with solar years like fairy tale diplomats. And then there were the Greeks and Romans, otherwise known as Calendar Drama Club. Their lunar-based early calendars were an overwhelming pile of improvisation, superstition, and political mischief. Since intercalary months had to be officially declared, Roman priests, who doubled as calendar managers, could conveniently forget to declare them in years that suited their friends in office. Yes, dear sleeper, there was once a time when time itself was political lobbying with a crescent moon hat. Eventually, all of this lunar fuss sparked a question that would echo through the marble atriums of Rome. Why follow the moon if it won't play nicely with the sun? That question, softly snoring in the minds of priests, harvesters, and chronically late senators, would spark revolutions in timekeeping. But before we turn that particular historical page, let's take a moment to appreciate the dreamy chaos of it all. Imagine being a humble Babylonian farmer crouching beside your barley, thinking, when are we again? A fair question, one might say, for any century. And so, the moon, that glowing ghost of the night sky, continued to wax and wane, while humanity scrambled slightly below, clutching notepads and looking for lost days. Because even as people tried desperately to nail time down like a poster on a windy wall, the moon kept floating away. And in our next quiet breath through history, time itself will be locked into stone, names, and imperial whims, drawn not just by starlight or tides, but by a man named Julius and the calendar he saw fit to wrestle into place. Chapter 9. Caesar and the 445-day year, when Rome overhit snooze. Close your eyes now and imagine Rome, not the chaotic Caesar-stabbing, toga-wearing, fire risk on every corner Rome, but a Rome wrapped in sunlight, with toga hems lazily grazing cobbled streets, and a calendar system wobbling like a drunk centurion. Yes, dear dreamer, the year was 46 BCE. The Roman calendar had fallen so far out of sync with the solar year that officials, farmers, and even astrologers were giving up entirely. According to official reckoning, spring now arrived sometime in mid-autumn, and festivals meant to thank the gods for harvest came before actual sowing. It was a mess, like trying to read a sundial inside a cave, or using a calendar that considers Tuesday to be both a marketing suggestion and a philosophical riddle. Enter Julius Caesar, ambitious, dramatic, and with cheekbones rivaled only by his bold approach to timekeeping. He didn't just come to conquer Gaul. He'd now set his sword on the ultimate enemy, temporal chaos. You see, Rome at the time was working with a lunar calendar, months that tried to follow the moon, but wildly missed the mark, year after year. Religious officials known as pontifices had the power to insert extra months whenever they felt the calendar needed a software update. Naturally, this power got wrapped up in politics. If your buddy was running for office, well, just throw in a bonus February to stretch the campaigning season. If the harvest festival fell inconveniently during a war, just delay the gods. They'll understand. By the time Caesar returned from his victorious campaigns in Egypt, where by the way they had a much more sensible solar calendar, he'd had enough. So with all the subtlety of a curtain drop at the Colosseum, he announced a grand reform. And oh, what a reform it was. He called in help from Sosigenes, a Greek-Egyptian astronomer whose job description suddenly included redesigning time. Sosigenes suggested Rome chuck its moon-based messy math and adopt a solar year based on Earth's reliable pirouette around the sun, roughly 365.25 days. Thus, the Julian calendar was born, with its neat 365 days and a leap year every 4 turns. Elegant, logical, and, dare we say it, rather Roman. But before this clean slate could begin, Rome needed to realign. Like someone who'd stayed up for 2 nights and had to reset their circadian rhythm with a 14-hour nap and 4 espressos. So Caesar gave them the Year of Confusion, a name well earned. To bring the clustered calendar back into harmony with the seasons, he added extra days, and then more days, 37 of them to be specific, turned an unassuming year into a hallway of time that just kept going. Rumors say some people lost track entirely of what season it was. One distant province declared spring, then quietly changed its mind a few weeks later. All in all, that year included not 12, but 15 months, stacking and stretching until the Romans wandered around unsure whether they were aging gracefully or just trapped in a bureaucratic dreamscape. But oh, was it thorough. By the time the sun crossed over into 45 BCE, the calendar and the seasons were finally holding hands again, giggling about equinoxes like giddy schoolchildren. The Julian calendar marched on, with minor tweaks and the occasional leap year confusion. Some folks forgot the every 4 years rule and just leapt at will. It ruled over European timekeeping for more than 1,600 years, and yet even Caesar's mighty calendar had a tiny flaw. That pesky quarter day, 0.10078, too many to be precise, built up like sneaky little minutes hiding under the fridge, unsuspecting until 10 whole days went missing. But that, dear listener, is a quiet little storm still hiding behind history's curtain. For now, rest in the long shadow of Caesar's 445-a-day year, a season-stretching marathon where Roman time wandered gently, and everyone probably just gave up on being punctual. As night pulls her woolen shawl across the sky, let your thoughts drift like sandal-wearing senators wondering why it was still March 2 weeks past, and beyond the horizon of Saturn's dreams, another calendar whisper lies in wait, where popes and scholars conspire, and time prepares to take yet another leap. Chapter 10. A leap through time, wearing Roman sandals. Let's drift now, gently as candle smoke, to a moment when time did a little two-step to correct itself. Yes, this chapter is about leap years, but don't worry. While that sounds like the sort of thing that might make your eyelids leap shut, it will instead cradle you gently into historical whimsy, with just a hint of toga. Our story lands us in ancient Rome, where calendars were as political as Senate debates and nearly as chaotic. Remember that Julius Caesar, the man who could conquer Gaul before breakfast, was also quite frazzled by his own calendar. The Roman calendar, by the time Caesar inherited it, was a bit of a mess. For one thing, it was lunar. That is, it followed the moon like a dog follows sausages. This meant months would drift slowly out of sync with the seasons, until, say, spring festivals started flopping around in midwinter. Not ideal for a civilization that relied heavily on farming, and even more heavily on dramatic religious festivals involving flower garlands and goats. To fight this seasonal creep, Roman priests, called pontifices, were allowed to add extra days here and there like seasoning soup to taste. The trouble was, these priests were delightfully corrupt. They would simply add whole months when it suited them, sometimes to lengthen the time an ally stayed in power, or to delay an enemy's term from starting. You could wake up in a month and find out it was suddenly another one, like a bureaucratic jump scare. Exhausted by this lunar lunacy, Julius Caesar turned to one of the ancient world's most unsung geniuses, an Alexandrian astronomer named Sosigenes. Sosigenes wore sandals, we presume, and a deeply furrowed brow of eternal mathematical concern. He told Caesar, essentially, "Julius, my good man, follow the sun. It doesn't lie." And so, with the decree of a dictator and the quiet calculations of a stargazer, the solar calendar was born anew. The year would no longer chase the moon like an indecisive romantic. No, it would follow the sun, the burnt orange chariot across the sky, steady and reliable. Sosigenes cleverly calculated that the year should be 365 and 1/4 days long. Not bad for someone doing it without a desktop calculator or even shoes with arch support. To make up for that sneaky quarter day, they decided to add a whole extra day, once every 4 years. Thus was born the leap year, a peculiar pocket of time inserted into February, the calendar's smallest and shyest month. It was as if the year took a quiet breath and said, "Pardon me, a little space please, just need 24 more hours to get aligned." But of course, things didn't go entirely smoothly, because this is history. The first few centuries of leap years were like a new dance learned by a very confused village. At first, the priestly calendar keepers misunderstood Caesar's plan and began adding leap days every 3 years instead of every 4. A bit over-enthusiastic, like someone clapping out of time at a concert. It took a few emperors before things settled down. And let's talk about February, shall we? It seems rather unfair, doesn't it? Poor February, already shortchanged with only 28 days, then burdened with the awkward job of holding the leap day. Why not June or October? Months with the confidence to strut 31 days could surely spare one. But no, February got it. There was a reason though. The Romans considered February to be a month of ritual purification and quiet reflection. Slipping an extra day into it was seen as a respectful pause between winter's hush and spring's stirrings, like placing a bookmark in time and whispering, "Almost there." So when you see February 29th show up once every 4 years, remember this charming little quirk is the ghost of Caesar's ambition, Sosigenes' math, and a long history of slippery calendars learning how to walk straight. Today, our leap years seem normal, almost boring, but they are relics of a world where time was not fixed and seasons could slide away like dreams mid-morning. It's rather lovely, really, a shared agreement across centuries that every 4th year we all get a free Tuesday. And with that gentle thought, let's slowly step away from Rome's sunlit streets and drift toward darker skies where monks with candles await, calendars in hand, ready to change time again. Quietly, of course. Chapter 11 of Popes and Peculiar Planets, the Curious Hands Behind Time. While the stars above spin their silent choreography and the moon tugs gently on the tides of both ocean and emotion, let us drift now into a tale of sacred ambition, calendar chaos, and a man named Gregory who reshuffled the cosmos. With paperwork, close your eyes, unless they've closed themselves already. Picture Rome in the late 16th century, a city where marble whispers history, Incense kisses the air, and time is, quite literally, a little bit off. By the time we reach Pope Gregory XIII in 1582, the Julian calendar had been running a bit, shall we say, fast. Not by hours or minutes, but by days. Entire days sliding off the celestial rails, like a sleepy conductor snoozing through timetables. The problem? The Julian calendar, devised centuries earlier by Julius Caesar, more on him another time, had assumed that each year was 365.1025 days, so with mathematical good intentions, it threw in a leap day every 4 years. Seemed fair, logical even, but unfortunately, and this is very relatable, it was just a tiny bit wrong. In truth, the Earth takes about 365.2 days to circle the Sun, like some subtle solar waltz more precise than Caesar had predicted. That infinitesimal error, just 11 minutes and 14 seconds per year, began adding up like pennies in the couch cushions of time. By the 1500s, the spring equinox, which was supposed to bloom with unfurling tulips and the angelic hope of March 21st, had begun arriving on March 11th. You see, this was no small bother for Rome. Misaligned equinoxes meant Easter, that floating feast of chocolate and resurrection, was floating too far from its divine due date. It was, quite literally, wandering the weeks like a confused goose. So Pope Gregory XIII, a man not known for his casual use of sundials, decided it was time for, well, time to be fixed. Enter the Gregorian calendar. Now, this was no mere adjustment. This was a celestial audit. The Pope declared that 10 days needed to vanish. Poof, gone. Like socks in a sleepy laundry room. And so, in October of 1582, something quite magical and unnerving happened. The calendar jumped from October 4th to October 15th. No one lived through October 5th to the 14th that year. Imagine misplacing nearly 2 weeks of your life, especially the good bits, like Thursday's ravioli night. Some citizens were suspicious, some were furious, others were, let's be honest, simply confused. Bakers fretted over spoilage. Renters wondered if they still owed for a full month. One can imagine the calendar-based excuses becoming suddenly creative. Oh no, I was supposed to pay you back on the 7th. Well, you see, that day doesn't exist anymore. Divine decree. Sorry. But the reform didn't stop there. Gregory's egg-headed astronomers, cloaked in robes and late-night candlelight, crafted a whole new leap year rule to keep future centuries in line. Here's how it works. Leap years still happen every 4 years, but not on century years, unless they're divisible by 400. Yes, it's maddening. And yes, it means that the year 1600 was a leap year, but 1700, 1800, and 1900 were not. Meanwhile, 2000 was. So if you're ever feeling left out at a cocktail party, try bringing up this tidbit. It might not win you friends, but it will bewilder them into silence. The Gregorian calendar caught on slowly, and sometimes stubbornly. Catholic countries embraced it promptly, nodding politely at papal command, while Protestant regions folded their arms and muttered things like, "We're not letting the Pope steal our days." Britain, for example, clung to the Julian system until 1752, nearly 170 years of late Easter eggs and misaligned solstices. When it finally made the switch, it too chiseled away September, removing 11 days from the calendar. People reportedly rioted, shouting, "Give us our 11 days," though historians now suspect that may be more myth than mayhem. Still, imagine your birthday disappearing, or worse, tax day. And yet, through all the deletions and algorithmic precision, humans kept on walking forward through time, calendar or not. So as we rest beneath our blanket of years, and you begin to slip gently into a dream dawdling just beyond midnight. Think of Gregory, the Pope who evicted time from 10 whole days just to make sure Easter didn't get lost again. And now, as the minutes hold hands with the stars, we drift next to a very different kind of timekeeper, one with wheels, gears, and unfortunate accuracy. Chapter 12. The Pope Who Reset the Clock. Close your eyes, darling listener, and listen closely, not too closely, or you might wake up. Tonight we float back to the 16th century, where we find an elderly cleric in Rome squinting at stars and sighing deeply at the calendar. His name was Pope Gregory XIII, and he did something that few mortals dare dream. He edited time itself with a pen and a prayer. You see, by the late 1500s, the Julian calendar, once the pride of Julius Caesar, had grown embarrassingly plump. It had been gaining about 11 minutes each year since its debut in 45 BCE. The result? Over 1,000 years of sluggish drift had added up to a whopping 10 whole days out of sync with the heavens. Springtime, that dainty annual guest of blossoms and bees, was showing up fashionably late. And the church was not amused. This was not merely an aesthetic problem. No. Easter, the holiest of all Christian holidays, relied on a symphony of astronomical events, the vernal equinox and the full moon playing in a cosmic duet. But with time slipping off tempo, Easter was in danger of wandering across the calendar like a tipsy troubadour. Something had to be done. Enter Pope Gregory XIII, a man with enough scrolls in his study and star charts in his soul to attempt what many feared, an official calendar correction. The church assembled a dream team of mathematicians, astronomers, and folks whose hobbies included precision. Chief among them was a Jesuit priest and astronomer named Christopher Clavius, who looked at the cosmos and said, quite accurately, something's off. And so, armed with charts, compasses, and alarming confidence, they hatched a plan as bold as it was bizarre. They would leap forward in time by deleting 10 days altogether. The Pope issued a decree. After Thursday, October 4th, 1582, the very next day shall be Friday, October 15th. Yes, they skipped 10 days. Just like that. Imagine the confusion. People went to bed on the 4th and awoke in what felt like mid-October. One poor soul may have gone to sleep with a debt due on the 7th and woken up joyfully debt-free until someone explained the Pope was not forgiving loans, just centuries of celestial miscalculation. And yet, the world kept spinning, though not everyone spun in unison. Catholic countries like Spain, Portugal, and Italy obeyed immediately. Protestant nations, however, sipped their tea suspiciously. They didn't trust the Pope's time magic and clung to the Julian calendar like a tattered security blanket. England refused to adopt the new system for over 150 years. That's right, your ancestors in London were still living a week behind their Italian pen pals, receiving letters that accused them of answering too early or too late, depending on where you stood on papal edits. Some English folk went so far as to riot when the calendar was finally changed, shouting, "Give us back our 11 days," a phrase that sounds much more poetic when chanted with torches, pitchforks, and a healthy misunderstanding of mathematics. But Gregory's plan wasn't just cut and delete. He also refined leap years. Under the Julian system, every 4th year was a leap year, bloating the calendar like a medieval sponge cake. So the Gregorian plan said, fine, every 4th year is a leap year, unless it's a century not divisible by 400. So the year 1600, leap year. 1700, nope. 1800, sorry. 2000, you're leaping, baby. It was an elegant tweak, like hemming the hem of time's fabric. The beauty of the Gregorian calendar was that it realigned human timekeeping with astronomical reality. It re-anchored us to the dance of the earth and sun and trimmed off the cosmic overgrowth of the centuries. It's the calendar most of us use today. Each oddly named month, each mysteriously placed leap year, the result of a papal decree and a handful of tenacious stargazers. So next time your phone pings a date in October, take a breath and spare a tiny thought for those 10 days that never happened, days that never were. They exist only as a wrinkle in the world's collective bedsheet. And speaking of bedsheets, pull yours close and rest easy, for in our next moon-dappled stretch of time, we'll drift somewhere colder, where calendars met crossroads and counted the days not by the sun, but by the snow. Chapter 13. The Pope, the Peasant, and the Problem with October. If you had been living in Italy in the year 1582, you might have gone to bed on Wednesday, October 4th, dreaming of bread, saints, or perhaps your landlord Giovanni, then awoken cheerfully the next day on Friday, October 15th. Yes, Thursday just went missing. 11 whole days, poof, lost like socks under a medieval mattress. But don't panic. There wasn't a cosmic hiccup or a time-traveling goat. Instead, this heavenly vanishing act was courtesy of Pope Gregory XIII and his surprisingly enthusiastic team of calendar revisionists. You see, calendars in the 16th century had a small, sleepy problem, one so subtle it tiptoed in like a yawning monk. That problem, the Julian calendar named after Julius Caesar, yes, he of salad and betrayal fame, was drifting. Not dramatically, mind you. We're talking about a slippage of approximately 11 minutes per year. But like a leaky rowboat, those minutes added up. By the time Gregory sat upon the papal throne, the calendar was lagging 10 full days behind the actual equinox. For centuries, the Church had tied its most sacred holidays, Easter in particular, to celestial events such as the spring equinox. But the more Julian time ticked, the more Easter began to float around the calendar like an indecisive duck. Enter the Gregorian calendar, the world's most ecclesiastically endorsed timekeeping system. Pope Gregory XIII, to his credit, did not try to merely slap a band-aid on the sandcastle of time. Instead, he summoned a committee of mathematicians, astronomers, and holy bureaucrats, basically the Avengers of scheduling. The Gregorian solution had two parts. First, erase the drift by deleting 10 days. Second, rewrite the leap year rules. Caesar's version had made every fourth year a leap year. Gregorian math, however, got persnickety. It said, you may be a leap year if you are divisible by 4, unless you're divisible by 100, unless you're also divisible by 400, in which case, carry on. A recipe so finely tuned it could give pastry chefs envy. Still, those mathy miracles were only part of the tale. The real spice came in the rollout. On October 4th, 1582, the Pope issued his decree. The next day, October 15th, dawned. No robberies, no rebellions, just very confused bakers, wondering why their sourdough hadn't risen. While Catholic countries like Italy, Spain, and Portugal switched literally overnight, Protestant regions were more suspicious of papal punctuality. England, in classic English fashion, refused to join the time party for nearly 170 years. When they finally relented in 1752, they had to skip 11 days, and the public reaction was unsettled. According to centuries' worth of historical exaggeration, English crowds supposedly protested with signs reading, "Give us our 11 days," though that specific phrasing may have been more pub talk than printed protest. The panic was real. Some believed they'd lost part of their lives, pay, rent, the chance for their hens to hatch, or worse, time they were owed for growing old. There was genuine legal confusion. Debts due on missing days, birthdays vanished, and Parliament looking distinctly sheepish in powdered wigs. Meanwhile, the peasants of Europe simply adjusted. Chickens kept laying eggs, and the sun kept rising. Time, after all, doesn't quibble about what name you give the day. Funny thing though, that moment of missing days reminds us that time is, at its heart, a shared illusion. We agree, together, what time it is, which is pretty cozy when you think about it. Like synchronized naps across continents, a sort of planetary exhale. And Gregory's calendar stuck, not immediately, not uniformly, but eventually. By the time the 20th century yawned into being, nearly the entire world was peaking at the same calendar, more or less. And the missing days of 1582, they remain a peculiar hiccup, a papal edit in the grand manuscript of history. Now, as you tuck yourself under the quilt of time zones and months named after emperors and gods, let's drift softly toward the ticking minds who kept trying to measure the immeasurable, searching for calendars even more accurate, more precise, even more obsessed with the dance of days. Because in the world of timekeeping, there's always another second to spare. Chapter 14. The Pope, the Leap, and the 10 days that never happened. Picture it, October of 1582. You go to bed on Thursday, October 4th, wrapped in your finest linen nightie, dreaming of lentil stew and tax reform. You wake up the next morning, stretch your arms, and glance at the calendar. And it's October 15th. Wait, what? You blink a few times. Was the stew that strong? Did someone tamper with your papyrus? No, it's real. 10 days, just gone. Vanished like socks in a laundry barrel. The calendar did a quiet little leap, and the world didn't end. But oh, how close we'd come. This gentle glitch in time was the culmination of centuries of celestial awkwardness, an astronomical misunderstanding between Earth's orbit and humanity's very strong opinions about when Easter should fall. Our well-meaning culprit, Pope Gregory III. Now, Gregory XIII was not the sort of man to miss an appointment. To him, a calendar was not just a way to remember your cousin's wedding. It was a sacred map of cosmic balance. And by the 1500s, the old Julian calendar, bless its Roman bones, was slipping out of sync with the solar year. Each year, the Julian calendar was off by roughly 11 minutes and 14 seconds. Small potatoes, you might think. But pile up centuries of those tiny errors, and you've got yourself a messy astronomical oatmeal. By the time of Mr. Gregory's papacy, the calendar had drifted about 10 days out of alignment with the sun. This was distressing, not because peasants were missing birthdays, although that certainly happened, but because Easter was starting to unravel. The Council of Nicaea, back in 325 CE, had solemnly decreed that Easter must fall on the Sunday, following the first full moon after the vernal equinox. Yes, it was a bit like a sacred treasure hunt led by a particularly poetic astronomer. But by the 1500s, civilization was celebrating the resurrection well before spring had properly sprung. This, the church decided, was not ideal. Enter the calendar fixers. Astronomers, monks, mathematicians, they all donned their pointy thinking caps and squinted at the stars. Chief among them was Aloysius Lilius, a brainy chap with an excessive fondness for computation. He tinkered with leap years, shaved off excess time, and presented a system that would eventually become the Gregorian calendar, a leaner, cleaner version of its Julian cousin. There was just one hiccup. In order for the new calendar to align properly, 10 extra days had to be lopped off. Not smoothed gradually, no gentle phasing in. Simply snip, like trimming your bangs after a dream about scissors. So in October 1582, Pope Gregory XIII declared that the day after October 4th would be October 15th. Just like that. And it worked. Mostly. Some Europeans adjusted their spectacles, mumbled a confused, "What day is it again?" and carried on fermenting cabbage. Others were less enthusiastic. Protests broke out. Riots even. People swore the Pope had stolen 10 days of their lives. Some feared they'd been cheated out of rent payments, while others claimed Gregory had mischievously shortened time itself as part of a sinister plot involving witches, Protestantism, or a badly timed lunar eclipse. In Germany, pamphlets warned that through this calendar, the Pope is robbing us of 10 days of sleep, which, honestly, does feel like a legitimate concern when you've been up late worrying about indulgences. Even England refused to adopt the new calendar immediately, declaring it too papish. Brits kept to their beloved Julian style for nearly 170 more years, creating a delightful period when neighbours in different countries couldn't agree on what year it was, and sometimes not even what day. Birthdays became suggestions, appointments, aspirational. Imagine being a travelling merchant caught in the borderlands. You leave Paris on February 16th and arrive in London the next day, on February 5th. Did time go backward? Did you arrive before you left? Or are you simply early in a country running 10 days late? Somehow, civilization survived this chronological chaos. The sun kept rising. Chickens kept laying eggs. And the Gregorian calendar slowly spread across sleepy kingdoms and suspicious empires, like a very persuasive blanket of time. And so, historians agree, the world didn't lose 10 days, but rather, it finally found its rhythm again. When the stars and the seasons realigned, there was a strange sort of peace in the air, as if even the heavens breathed a tiny sigh of relief. Now that we've skipped ahead through time, gently and absurdly, it's time to peek behind one of the final riddles of the calendar. A once every 4 years gift that isn't always what it seems. So fluff your pillow and prepare for a most curious leap. Chapter 15. The Pope who breathed time back into order. By the soft flickering candlelight of a 16th century Vatican study, a man in a very large hat contemplated something quite small, the size of a solar year. His name was Pope Gregory XIII, and though he didn't know it yet, he was about to perform one of the most ambitious calendar corrections in history, the papal equivalent of tidying up the entire timeline with a feather duster and a firmly worded decree. It began, as many grand fixes do, with a nagging little problem: the Julian calendar, which had valiantly carried Western Christendom through wars, coronations, plagues, and weddings, was, unfortunately, just a touch off. About 11 minutes and 14 seconds off per year, to be exact. Which doesn't sound like much, until you realize this calendar had been drifting like a sleepy canoe on the river of time for over 1,500 years. Put more simply, the Julian calendar assumed a year was 365.25 days long, but the universe, in its passive-aggressive precision, knew the actual year was roughly 365.422 days, an eyebrow-raising difference only if you like your equinoxes to arrive on time. Thank you very much. This small annual mistake had quietly compiled into a seasonal disaster. By the mid-1500s, the spring equinox was arriving on March 11th, instead of the usual March 21st, which, you might imagine, was less than ideal for a church that relied on the equinox to calculate the date of Easter. That great movable feast of lilies, lambs, and last-minute questions like, "Wait, isn't it early this year?" So Pope Gregory XIII summoned scholars, mathematicians, and experts in the subtle, dark arts of celestial motion. Among them was Aloysius Lilius, a man with a brain so well organized he could reorganize the entire year before breakfast, and Christoph Clavius, a Jesuit astronomer who would take Lilius's models and turn them into papal policy. Now, the fix wasn't subtle. It involved slicing away time like a master sculptor, removing 10 entire days from the calendar. In October of 1582, folks across Catholic Europe closed their eyes on October 4th and opened them on October 15th. 10 days vanished, not a single soul aged, and not one bakery got to sell bread on the 5th. For the curious, no one was paid for those missing days. Imagine the bewildered church bell ringers, the frantic merchants, the confused peasants flailing their pitchfork calendars. "Have I been asleep for a week?" may have been uttered more than once. But this wasn't just a deletion. Gregory's team also introduced leap year rules, elegant loops and conditional clauses that made the average calendar year more accurately mirror the tropic year. From now on, every fourth year would still be a leap year, except for years divisible by 100, unless they were also divisible by 400, which means, for instance, the year 1600 got a leap day, but the year 1700 did not. Only a deep, tranquil patience could follow it all. The Gregorian calendar, as it came to be known, modestly named after its papal parent, restored the spring equinox to its rightful month and stabilized the way we mark our days. Naturally, not everyone jumped aboard the time train promptly. Protestant countries, suspicious of papal doings, refused to adopt the new calendar for generations. England, for example, held onto the old Julian model until 1752. By that point, it required removing 11 days. People went to bed on September 2nd and woke up on September 14th, grumbling profusely. Rumors spread that rioters yelled, "Give us our 11 days back." They didn't, but it makes a compelling bedtime myth, doesn't it? Even today, while most of the world uses the Gregorian calendar, a few gentle holdouts still follow the Julian one for religious observances. Time, after all, is a deeply personal thing. And yet, from one papal penstroke came a reordering of days, a great celestial house cleaning to align our clocks with the cosmos once again. Not out of tyranny, but out of a desire for Easter eggs to hatch on time. As the candles flicker low and the stars trace ancient loops overhead, let us rest in the quiet comfort that time, as unruly as it may seem, once felt the gentle hand of Gregory and obeyed. And in the velvety dusk of our tale, we drift toward the next curious wrinkle in time, one brought not by popes or emperors, but by train schedules and standardized afternoons. Chapter 16, The Phantom 11 Days and the Riot that Forgot What It Was About. Let us drift now to a peculiar moment in 18th century England, a time when the sun still rose, the birds still chirped, but the calendar lost 11 days, and no one could quite agree on whether Tuesday was still Tuesday, or if it had eloped with Thursday. In the year 1752, the British Empire did something rather shocking, though in the polite tones of powdered wigs and gentle chaos. It adopted the Gregorian calendar. This calendar, first introduced by Pope Gregory XIII in 1582, had slowly been making its way across the European continent like a fashionable coat that everyone eventually began wearing, reluctantly. England, however, had stubbornly clung to its own calendar, like that one uncle who refuses to upgrade from a flip phone. The Julian calendar, to be precise, introduced by Julius Caesar in 45 BCE, had served them well enough, until it didn't. Why the change, you ask gently into your pillow? Well, over the centuries, that snazzy Julian calendar had started adding a little too much time every year. About 11 minutes and 14 seconds too much. Not much at first, but like leaving a tea kettle just slightly off the heat, things got awkward over time. By the 18th century, the Julian calendar was a full 11 days behind the sun. Spring was drifting slowly into summer. Easter was hopping into the wrong week. Astronomers were losing track of the stars while clerics were lighting candles on the wrong feasts. The universe, it seems, had noticed. Enter Britain, reluctantly deciding it was time to join most of Europe by fixing the calendar problem. And how does one fix a drifting calendar? Why, one snips away the extra time like trimming bangs that grew too long. In September of 1752, England and its colonies simply declared that after September 2nd, it would immediately become September 14th. Yes, poof, 11 days disappeared. A Tuesday evening was followed by a Wednesday nearly 2 weeks later, and nobody aged a smidge. It's like time hiccuped, politely covered its mouth, and went straight back to business. This sudden vanishing of 11 whole days gave rise, quite sleepily, to what some called the calendar riots. Now, to be perfectly honest, and we are because lies make for restless dreams, these riots are more legend than properly documented rebellion. We picture cobbled streets filled with candlelit confusion, as large bearded men in breeches stomp about shouting, "Give us back our 11 days." But primary records are suspiciously quiet. That angry slogan, repeated in history books and dreams alike, may very well have come from a misreading of a prominent 1752 political cartoon. But oh, what a delightful image it conjures. People rioting not over taxes or bread, but over days fluttering off like runaway calendar pages. Still, confusion reigned. Some landlords tried to collect a full month's rent despite the 11-day loss, claiming time was just being lazy. Servants were unsure if their wages ought to be docked. After all, had they not technically worked fewer days that month? The government, in turn, assured people that they hadn't lost 11 days of life, just calendar paper. Not that this explanation calmed everyone. And so, September 1752 passed with a dazed blink, like waking from a nap you didn't mean to take. Clerks crossed out dates, diaries looked peculiar, and birthday parties had to be held on dates that no longer technically existed. Even George Washington's birthday was affected. Born on February 11th, under the Julian calendar, he began celebrating on February 22nd, adjusting to the Gregorian way of being born. It's not often one changes their birthday due to celestial math, but Washington, as with most things, managed it with grace and excellent posture. The British switch wasn't the last time the calendar caused public confusion, of course, but it was perhaps the most poetic. A rare moment when constitutional empires, humble peasants, and house cats alike felt a bit disoriented, all trying to catch up with a sun that had been so patiently keeping pace all along. Tonight, as your own clock ticks along gently, imagine those vanished 11 days floating somewhere just out of reach, a hazy dream world of phantom Tuesdays and unborn Thursdays, a secret sleepy realm where time once tiptoed away to realign itself, and where even the most mundane Wednesday might have its moment of mystery. And speaking of reordering time, as the minutes hush and your heartbeat finds its lullaby rhythm, next we'll voyage to a land where years got numbered backwards and the calendar faced the slow, stubborn puzzle of zero. Chapter 17. Leap Years, Odd Rules, and the Pope who fixed February. February, the shortest and shyest month on the calendar. It comes in with a quiet chill, stays just long enough to remind us that snow can happen sideways, and then it tiptoes out before anyone can spell groundhog correctly on the first try. But why is February so unbalanced? Why does it get 28 days when the others are flouncing around with their 30s and 31s? And what's the deal with February 29th sneaking in every 4 years like a well-dressed time burglar? Curl yourself into the blankets, dear listener, because tonight we unravel the sleepy riddle of the leap year and how a pope with punctual tendencies once decided to realign time using mathematics, moonlight, and a deep-seated dislike for drifting Easter dates. Let's ease back through the mists of time to the year 1582. Europe is abuzz with discoveries, debates, and the alarming realization that the calendar was slipping out of sync by days, not just minutes. The Julian calendar, dreamt up by our old friend Julius Caesar, had been running the timekeeping show since 45 BCE, but there was a tiny, pesky error in its equation. You see, Caesar's calendar assumed the solar year, the time it takes the Earth to orbit the Sun, was 365.1025 days. So every fourth year, we added an extra day to keep things in line. Seemed clever, felt clever. Unfortunately, it was also slightly wrong. The solar year is actually closer to 365.222 days, which may seem like a trivial difference, barely 11 minutes, but 11 minutes a year adds up. Over centuries, that little error had snowballed into a bulky, calendar-busting mess. By the 1500s, the spring equinox, once faithfully occurring around March 21st, had sneaked backward to March 11th. This seriously annoyed the Catholic Church, particularly because Easter, which was meant to be celebrated in the springtime, was starting to wander into mildly confusing territory, calendrically speaking. One fluff of the arithmetic, and you could be saying Happy Easter while still shoveling snow off your tomatoes. Enter Pope Gregory XIII, the man who loved moons, calendars, and deeply impractical hats. With papal resolve and a team of astronomy-minded monks, Gregory commissioned a fix for this swirling tide of drifting days. They summoned Italian astronomer Luigi Lilio, whose plan was simple-ish: shave off 10 days, tweak the leap year rule, and observe the serenity of synchronized solstices forevermore. So in October 1582, people in several Catholic countries went to bed on Thursday, October 4th, and woke up on Friday, October 15th. No, they didn't oversleep. Those days simply ceased to exist. Time, for the briefest of intervals, was neatly erased. This calendrical contraction was seen by many as a divine intervention, and by others as a cunning plot to steal people's birthdays. Now, about the leap years. Gregory's new calendar, the shiny Gregorian calendar, still used leap years, but with a caveat. Every year divisible by 4 would still be a leap year, unless it was divisible by 100, unless it was also divisible by 400. So 1600, leap year. 1700, 1800, 1900, nope, 2000, leap year again. It's like a logic puzzle designed by a very stern monk with a flair for drama, but it worked. The Gregorian calendar trimmed time into a sleek, manageable system that we still use today. Well, most of us. Some Protestant nations weren't entirely keen on following a papal decree, even if it involved something as seemingly harmless as clocks and seasons. England and its colonies, for instance, refused to adopt the Gregorian calendar for nearly 200 more years, eventually making the switch in 1752. At that point, their calendar leapt forward by 11 days. People joked, and sometimes raged, that the government had stolen their time. One pamphlet demanded, "Give us our 11 days." There is something quietly magical about leap days. They sneak in every 4 years like a whispered apology from the universe. Sorry, I've been slightly off. It's the one day when babies born get to age slower than the rest of us, when time seems gingerly handed back, if only temporarily. February 29th is the calendar's secret handshake, and it's thanks to Pope Gregory and his mathematical dream team that it exists at all. So tonight, as you drift gently towards sleep, know that your days are longer, your seasons more synchronized, and your springtime holidays roughly where they belong. All because one man in an enormous hat decided that 11 minutes mattered. And speaking of drifting, next we turn toward a place where time and space got suspiciously political. The royal reckoning of British calendar rebels. Chapter 18, A Spoonful of Seconds, the quest for time's tiniest fix. Somewhere between the nip of autumn and the gentle stretch of starlight, the most brilliant minds on earth gathered to answer a deceptively sleepy question. What is a second truly? Not just a tick or a tock, not just a blip between blinks, but a real, measurable, defendable bit of time's endless ribbon. And ever so slowly, they came to realize that time itself did not care what humans thought. It adjusted itself ever so slightly, with no concern for our schedules, our railroads, or our carefully arranged calendars. The Earth, cheeky little planet that it is, does not spin in perfect rhythm. It wobbles, it fidgets, it pauses for cosmic snacks. But let us drift gently back to the 20th century, when this wobbling caused very serious men with very serious mustaches to get very sincerely confused. You see, atomic clocks had just entered the scene. Atomic clocks are like the monkish librarians of timekeeping. Instead of relying on how fast the Earth spins, which is, let's face it, a bit of a gamble, these clocks count incredibly consistent vibrations of cesium atoms. These atoms were, in essence, tiny cosmic metronomes, pinging at precisely the same rate over and over, with the kind of reliability you'd expect from a cat who knows it'll be fed at exactly 6:47 a.m. So in 1967, scientists officially declared that 1 second would henceforth be defined not by the Earth's rotation, but as exactly 9,192 out of 631,770 oscillations of a cesium-133 atom. An oddly specific number, yes, but atoms are nothing if not thorough. You might feel a comforting relief at this. Finally, you think, wrapping yourself in a mental blanket. They fixed time. But regrettably, Earth did not get the memo. Our planet, spinning a little slower with the years, continued to betray us, if only by milliseconds. The atomic clocks declared, "It is 12 Quetzal," while the sun, quirky old star, shrugged and said, "It feels more like 11:59 and some change." The solution to this tragic mismatch was delightfully strange and bureaucratic: the invention of the leap second. Now, leap seconds are not like leap years. They don't come every 4 years, and they don't involve wearing frog costumes, though one might argue they deserve to. A leap second is simply 1 second added to coordinated universal time to reconcile it with the Earth's slightly lazy spinning. Imagine the universe is a party, and Earth is showing up fashionably late. Leap seconds are the polite little buffer we add, offering Earth a moment to collect itself, maybe fix its tie, and arrive at the same time as the atomic clocks. The very first leap second was added on June 30th, 1972, at exactly 23:59:60 UTC. That's not a typo. For one magical, regulated moment, time embraced a visit from a second that technically shouldn't exist, and the world didn't end. Clocks didn't explode. There were, reportedly, no fainting goats. Some systems grumbled, mostly computers with strong opinions about how time should behave, but humanity carried on. Since then, leap seconds have been peppered into the calendar like peculiar croutons into the soup of time. As of now, just 27 have ever been added. Not frequently, but just enough to keep cosmic order eventually aligned with atomic precision. You might wonder, does a single second matter? To most people, not particularly, unless you're making popcorn while watching the microwave countdown, or trying to land a spacecraft, or coordinating international banking systems. But philosophically, well, the idea that humanity's grand technological prowess must occasionally step aside and allow Earth her natural sluggishness. It's oddly heartwarming. We try so hard to box time, to measure it down to millisecond marble grains, and yet, in the end, we accommodate the quiet truth that nothing in the universe moves exactly right on schedule. Not people, not planets, not even clocks. And so, with tolerance and tiny adjustments, we carry on through time, ever polite in our pursuit of precision. Close your eyes, dear voyagers of chronology, and imagine a cesium atom pulsing softly like a cosmic heartbeat. Imagine Earth spinning ever so slightly offbeat, like a grandparent dancing at a wedding, charming, unpredictable, and full of rhythm that doesn't always care for metronomes. But oh, where does time wander next? In our next quiet chapter, we'll follow how some nations decided to vote on time itself, with results that were, well, hilariously legislative. Let's go there, ever so slowly. Chapter 19. The Pope, the Leap, and the Case of the Vanishing Days. Now then, hush your thoughts and rest your head, because this is the part where time disappears. Not metaphorically, mind you. We're talking about 10 actual days, gone, vamoosed, snipped clean out of history with papal scissors, as sharp as holy bureaucracy allows. All thanks to a man in a white hat who simply couldn't bear the thought of Easter wobbling through the seasons like a tipsy goose. Yes, my fellow dreamer, welcome to the Gregorian calendar reform. By the late 1500s, time was having something of a crisis. The Julian calendar, named ever so humbly after Julius Caesar, was aging with less grace than a spoiled cheese. It overestimated the solar year by about 11 minutes. Harmless enough, you might think. But 11 minutes per year for, say, 1,600 years. The seasons were slowly sliding away from their proper homes. Spring was tiptoeing towards summer, and Easter was threatening to leap out of alignment with the celestial choreography entirely. Enter Pope Gregory XIII, a man of faith, precision, and the firm opinion that time should do as it's told. With the help of astronomers, mathematicians, and at least one extremely overworked calendar consultant named Aloysius Lilius, Gregory devised a bold solution. A new calendar that corrected the seasonal drift, realigned Easter with the spring equinox, and removed 10 entire days from existence. Just snip, like trimming a particularly mischievous paragraph from a divine manuscript. Thus, in the year of our Lord 1582, something quite sleepy and surreal occurred. Thursday, October 4th was followed not by Friday the 5th, but by Friday the 15th. If someone had planned dinner for Tuesday the 10th, well, they'd simply never arrived. This time snip was not without confusion. Imagine waking up one morning to find your birthday has gone missing, or being owed wages for 10 days you never technically lived. Some grumbled about papal overreach. Others found it deeply suspicious, as though time theft were a Vatican hobby. In Protestant countries, the Gregorian calendar was treated with the same trust one might give a weasel in clerical robes. England, for instance, refused to adopt it for another 170 years, causing a long period in which correspondence between Europe and Britain was always 10 days late, and misunderstandings about meeting times were practically inevitable. Picture poor scholars writing puzzled letters. Dear colleague, I arrived for your November lecture as scheduled, and yet you say it was 10 days ago. Kindly advise whether it is I or time itself who is broken. Even when England finally caved in and adopted the Gregorian system in 1752, they had to delete 11 days instead of 10, due to the lateness of their action and further calendar creep. There were reports, admittedly exaggerated, of people rioting in the streets, shouting, "Give us back our 11 days." They felt robbed, literally cheated out of life itself, as if Parliament had wandered into their diaries and erased nearly 2 weeks of birthdays, beer nights, and perfectly good gossip. In truth, most folks simply scratched their heads and adjusted their calendars, while a few cheeky farmers claimed compensation for 11 days they hadn't harvested grain. Never underestimate the rural entrepreneur. But Gregory's calendar stuck the landing. By refining leap years, no more every 4 years simplicity. Oh no, now a century year only gets to leap if it's divisible by 400. It kept the solar year in tight celestial sync. That means you, dear listener, can now trust that March will be sprightly, October crisp, and Easter forever in the meandering neighborhood of daffodils. It's strange, though, to lie in bed and realize that 10 entire days, 10 sunrises, 10 moonlit evenings, 10 potential naps, simply never existed in much of Europe. If you listen quietly in those lost hours, maybe you'd hear ghostly yawns from dreamers in waiting, still hoping to tuck in under a temporally erased sky. And so, as we drift from papal payloads and calendar coups, rest in the knowledge that time, like bedtime, may be a little fictional, but always beautifully arranged. Drift deeper now, as we traverse to lands where clocks wear funny wigs and revolutions tick in step with history's heartbeat. Chapter 20. The Pope, the Stars, and the Missing Days. Shh, listen closely. Can you hear it? That's the sound of 11 days disappearing from history like socks behind the laundry machine. Our story drifts now to the year 1582, when time itself got a makeover. Not with lasers or spreadsheets, but with papal bulls and a startling confidence in astronomy for a world that still debated whether comets were portents or oversized sky bees. You see, by the late 16th century, the Julian calendar, named after our old friend Julius Caesar, was getting a bit saggy around the solstices. It had been loyally ticking along since 46 BCE, but unfortunately was just a tad overconfident in its math. Julius's calendar calculated the year to be about 365.225 days long, which seems close, doesn't it? Admirably precise for a guy who wore sandals and thought Egyptian Cleopatra was a Tinder match made by the gods. But alas, the Earth actually orbits the Sun in roughly 365.222 days. An irritating decimal, really. About 11 minutes too short every year. Tiny, yes. But as any cat will tell you, after 11 minutes of being ignored, small things accumulate. Over centuries, this error compounded, and by the 1500s, spring was showing up early to its own party. The March equinox was slipping, like a guest losing track of time at a particularly good feast. Festivals tied to agriculture, astronomy, and most touchily, Easter, were drifting out of sync. Enter the hero of this chapter, Pope Gregory XIII, a man who may not have known what Wi-Fi was, but very much disliked the idea of Easter lurching drunkenly through April like an unpredictable egg hunt. Gregory, a scholarly fellow with a fondness for reform and heavy robes, convened an elite time-fiddling task force of scholars, led by the brainy Italian doctor Aloysius Lilius. It was this Lilius who cooked up the new recipe for measuring our days. A reform nobody asked for, but by golly, everyone got. And so, on the night of October 4th, 1582, The people of Italy, Spain, Portugal, and Poland tucked themselves into bed, or at least into straw, under a safe moon, their household chickens probably oblivious to the dramas of celestial reform. They expected to wake up on October 5th. Instead, the next morning was October 15th. 10 days gone, just lopped off the calendar like a banana peel at a picnic. Bishops signed the decree, roosters crowed in confusion, and some people honestly thought the Pope had stolen days from their very lives. He hadn't. But one nun reportedly grumbled she had missed her name day, and there were rumours of peasants demanding back pay for non-existent hours. It was called the Gregorian calendar, sleek, smarter, and modestly less offensive to the sun. To fix the drift, this new calendar kept leap years, but with a twist. Only years divisible by 4 are leap years, unless they're divisible by 100, in which case they're not, unless they're also divisible by 400, in which case they are. Simple, right? Just the sort of bedtime logic we love, a mathematician's lullaby. Yet not everyone was so eager to leap into the Gregorian embrace. Protestant regions, suspicious of any papal doings, were hesitant. England in particular reacted as only England can, by waiting another 170 years just to be absolutely sure it wasn't a Catholic trap. When they finally adopted the new calendar in 1752, they had to discard 11 days. People were so confused they hung up posters that wailed, "Give us back our 11 days," as though time could be returned like overcooked mutton. And imagine being born on, say, October 10th, in one of those deleted years. Your birthday, poof, uninvited from history. But the Gregorian system stuck, largely because it worked. It was a tidy little compromise between the messiness of astronomy and the rigidity of bureaucracy. And it's the one most of us still use today, ticking along with its leap year pirouettes and its carefully balanced months. So the next time you glance at a calendar and see that February is politely shorter, thank not just Caesar, but Gregory, Lilius, and about 4 dozen bishops with quills. They bent the fabric of time gently, with enough diplomacy to usher in a new age, all under the warm light of a very patient sun. Now then, follow the calendar's gentle footsteps onward as we drift ever deeper into the centuries that tried and failed to make time behave. Let's turn now softly to a certain stubborn clockmaker. Chapter 21. The 1752 nap that lasted 11 days. Somewhere between ticking clocks and sun-dappled scrolls, nestled gently between reason and absurdity, lies the story of the British calendar reform of 1752, a tale of days lost, tempers flared, and peasants possibly demanding their days back with pitchforks in hand. Or, at least, with a disapproving mumble over their porridge. Now, darling dreamer, let's draw the curtains on this odd slice of history where time itself seemed to nod off. Once upon a very real 1751, the British Empire, known at the time for its impressive wigs, seafaring ambitions, and stubborn pride, realized that its calendar was wrong, very wrong. While much of Europe had long ago switched to the more accurate Gregorian calendar, thanks to Pope Gregory XIII back in 1582, Britain had been dragging its buckle-shoed heels for over 170 years. Why the delay? Religion, pride, and the general British fondness for doing things their own way. When the Catholics on the continent updated their calendars, the Protestant English were in no rush to follow the Pope's mathematical musings, no matter how sensible. Instead, they continued using the Julian calendar like old-timey rebels sipping lukewarm ale by candlelight. But here's the dreamy twist. The Julian calendar gained roughly 11 minutes each year. Tiny increments, like clockwork crumbs. Harmless, you'd think, but over centuries, they accumulate like dust behind a bookshelf. By the 1700s, the seasons were sliding out of sync with the dates. Spring was early, Easter was confused, and the sun seemed to be politely ignoring the calendar altogether. It was time, literally. So Parliament passed the calendar, new style. Act of 1750, the decision, drop 11 days to sync up with the rest of Europe. September 2nd, 1752 would be followed by September 14th, just like that. A vanishing act worthy of the grandest magician. Now, imagine waking up on what you believe is September 3rd and being told you've slept right through to the 14th. It's the kind of thing that would make even the most forgiving gooseboy spill his oats in disbelief. Officially, the transition was clean. No time portals, no black holes, just a gentle bureaucratic nudge into temporal obedience. But not everyone was comforted. Rumours, true or not, began to flutter like parchment in the breeze. Some accounts suggest that common folk cried, "Give us our 11 days." Were these real protests? Or the fevered dreams of pamphleteers and dramatists? Historians debate it like cats half-heartedly pawing at string. The phrase certainly appeared in satirical prints and political cartoons. Perhaps it became a kind of national bedtime joke, the way a missing sock becomes folklore in a household. The economic implications, well, even sleepy stories deserve a dash of accounting. Think of rent. Would a tenant owe a full month's pay for 19 days? And what about wages? Did time workers punch out for a week and a half without notice? There were indeed real squabbles about pruning salaries and adjusting leases, but overall, most Britons quietly accepted their lost chunk of calendar with a resigned sigh and an extra pint. But the real twist? Not only did dates leap forward, but New Year's Day changed too. Before 1752, the British year began on March 25th, so you could enjoy a January holiday while technically still living in the previous year. After the reform, the new year was set to the more familiar January 1st. That meant old records had to be corrected. Birthdays moved, contracts revised. Confusing notations like 17-22-3 appeared in manuscripts, as if scribes themselves weren't entirely sure which century they lived in. And what became of the missing days, those gently snipped September hours? Did they drift into a temporal attic where all lost time waits in slippers? Poets like to think so. Others, more practical, imagine that the lost days were like an unpaid nap, delightful for some, upsetting for others, and ultimately forgotten amidst the ongoing march, tiptoeing, really, of history. So next time your week feels suspiciously short, blame 1752. Somewhere, 11 days are still out there, probably very well rested. Now close your eyes and imagine a world where time itself takes a small bow, and old calendars whisper to each other in dusty drawers. For in the next soft chapter, we'll tiptoe into another twist of chronological cunning, where timekeeping meets trains and clocks get competitive. Chapter 22 of Pirate Popes and the Leap Year Conspiracy. Nestled between the folds of old maps and older arguments, there lies a peculiar tale of dates, dogma, and a prank history played on itself. This is the story of how the calendar was nearly swallowed by the very institution meant to protect its sacred precision. Imagine the year as a finely wound cuckoo clock, delightfully Swiss perhaps, and the 1500s as the moment the clockmaker sneezes mid-repair. Our tale begins in the heart of Renaissance Europe, that brocade-laden carnival of cathedrals, comets, and curious cardinals. The Julian calendar, bless its long-winded optimism, was still dutifully counting the days. But it had a tiny flaw. Like a romantic poet, it overstayed its welcome by a few breaths each year. 11 minutes and 14 seconds too many, to be exact. Not enough to ruin your morning baguette, but just enough to slowly slide the entire Christian calendar out of sync, like a drunken violinist falling behind the rest of the orchestra. By the mid-16th century, Easter, intended to spectacularly spring into March or April like a liturgical jack-in-the-box, was drifting towards summer. This was, understandably, a cosmic embarrassment. For a religion so invested in sacred timing, accidentally celebrating the resurrection mid-barbecue season was less than ideal. Enter Pope Gregory III, a deeply pious man, but also a calendar connoisseur suffering from a cosmic scheduling headache. He summoned his advisors, scholars, and the finest minds in timekeeping. Not an easy ask in a century where many still thought geese were spontaneously generated from barnyard dust. Chief among these minds was a Jesuit mathematician named Christopher Clavius, whose name sounds uncannily like the villain in a Shakespearean sci-fi tragedy. Clavius, thorough and bearded, leaned suspiciously over scrolls, celestial charts, and possibly the occasional goblet of sacramental wine. He confirmed that, yes, the calendar was off by 10 full days. If nothing changed, Christmas would eventually drift into Lent, and Saints' Days would arrive before the saints were even born. So Pope Gregory did something bold. He stole time itself. With a papal bull and no small amount of fanfare, he erased 10 days from the calendar in 1582. October 4th went to bed sobbing on a Thursday, and the very next morning, it was October 15th, chirping like a Friday. Imagine going to sleep and waking up feeling 10 days younger. Some called it divine intervention, others daylight robbery. But of course, Europe being Europe, not everyone was thrilled. Protestant nations, suspicious of anything cooked up in Rome, declared the new papal calendar a papist plot, a theological flat tire. England didn't adopt the corrected calendar for nearly 2 centuries, meaning Shakespeare and Galileo technically lived in different years, even while being alive at the same time. It was the temporal version of being ghosted while sitting in the same room. And while Pope Gregory snipped days with holy scissors, he also tackled an even sneakier villain, the leap year. Under old Julian rules, there was a leap day every 4 years with cheerful sincerity. But that pattern was still too generous, like a grandmother who gives you a sweater every week. Clavius and crew nimbly added a failsafe. Leap years would now skip when the year was divisible by 100, unless it was also divisible by 400. A charmingly absurd condition like saying, everyone gets cake on Fridays unless the moon is gibbous and your cousin plays the harpsichord. And just like that, the Gregorian calendar was born, smoother, sharper, less prone to seasonal wanderings. Yet even with this celestial surgery, not all accepted it. Mobs rioted in Britain when the 10 days were removed in 1752, yelling, "Give us our 11 days." Apparently, the loss of non-existent days was too much for polite society's delicate tea-time schedules. But in time, all but a few holdouts joined the Gregorian order. The calendar, for better or weirder, was healed, sort of. You might think this would be the perfect place to end the drama. A pope with a penchant for punctuality saves time itself, rips out 10 days, and institutes a mathy leap year clause that only a pocket calculator could love. Alas, dear dreamer, you're about to float into the part of history where railroads, time zones, and the tyranny of on time await. The sun is slipping past the steeples of sleepy centuries, and modernity is just beginning to knock, ever so precisely. Chapter 23, The Sultan, the Stars and the Leap Year Lament. Once upon a time, in that lovely, hazy medieval hour, when coffee was still a suspicious bean and time was mostly an interpretive dance, the Islamic world was quietly, beautifully ahead of its, time. Specifically, in the star-swept cities of the Abbasid Caliphate, scholars tiptoed through the heavens, charting the cosmos with dizzying precision, all while sipping date syrup and politely reinventing astronomy. It's here, under the warm rose-hued domes of Baghdad in the 9th century, that we meet one of our lesser-known calendar comrades, Al-Khwarizmi, mathematician, astronomer, and accidentally the naming father of algorithms. His calculations were so accurate that you could set your sundial by them, assuming your sundial hadn't been eaten by a roaming goat. This happened more than you'd think. Now, at this point in history, time was a serious business in the Islamic world, not just because it determined when to fast and when to feast, or because you had to know which direction to pray. Spoiler, it's toward Mecca. But also because there was something almost spiritual about measuring celestial rhythms. Timekeeping was both a science and a kind of sacred poetry. Picture an intellectual salon embroidered with lunar ephemerides and tea, lots of tea, where scholars debated whether Thursday was a real day or just a backstage Sunday. Islamic calendars, you see, are lunar. Every month begins with the first sighting of the crescent moon, which sounds rather romantic, and it is. But this also meant that months could drift across seasons, like sleepy children rolling across beds. Ramadan might appear in winter one year and summer the next, leaving the devout slightly disoriented but undeniably suntanned. This drifting led to one curious twist in history, because while the lunar Hijri calendar danced to moonlight, the solar-based Julian and later Gregorian calendar clung grimly to sunbeams. The result was a quiet cosmic tango in which civilizations would bump into each other on the edges of trade, diplomacy, and courtship, often unsure what day it actually was. In fact, one Persian astronomer, Omar Khayyam, yes, the same man who wrote dreamy poems about wine and roses, was so irritated by this calendrical chaos that he helped craft a solar calendar more accurate than the Gregorian one adopted centuries later in Europe. The Jalali calendar, introduced in 1079, was so precise it kept drift to one day in 5,000 years. That's mathematician speak for, take that Pope Gregory. But the Jalali didn't spread beyond Persia's fluffy borders, probably because it didn't come with a papal bull or a catchy rebrand. You know how it goes. Some calendars get fanfare, others just sip tea and wait for future scholars to notice them with dawning awe and mild embarrassment. And what of leap years? Ah yes, these noble intruders of the timekeeper's symphony. The Gregorian calendar added them with polite regularity. The lunar Hijri calendar, meanwhile, used a 30-year cycle with 11 leap years scattered about like forgotten socks, restoring just enough balance to keep the months from slipping into total anarchy. Which brings us finally to a charming tale from the Ottoman court, sometime in the 18th century, when Sultan Mahmud I, perplexed by the calendar differences, supposedly invited astronomers from different traditions to his palace. Each arrived with scrolls and tables and terrifyingly neat handwriting. After hours of polite squinting and cross-referencing, one scholar finally sighed and declared, "Your Majesty, as far as time goes, we are professionally deeply confused." The Sultan, unfazed, reportedly shrugged in the way only absolute monarchs can, and said, "Then we shall divide the hours equally, between tea and looking at the sky." A most peaceful policy. In the end, no matter how precise the calendar or how determined the timekeepers, history shows us again and again that humans are far better at measuring time than they are at agreeing on it. But perhaps that's the charm of it all. The idea that even empires could argue over what day it is while humming along beneath the same moon. And so, with the stars overhead gently rearranging themselves and the centuries slipping softly past like notes in a forgotten melody, we inch closer to the final tick of our sleepy tale. Just a few more moments and a few more heartbeats to travel. Let's close our eyes and follow time into its final chapter. Chapter 24, the midnight where time sighed and slept. And so the centuries marched, some confidently, some clumsily, into the delicate lattice work of what we now call calendar time, pausing occasionally for a well-earned nap or a widespread existential crisis. As we reach the final stitches of our quilted tale, we find ourselves in the quiet corners of history where seconds no longer chase each other, and humanity, at last, stopped adjusting the clocks long enough to dust itself off and whisper, "Close enough." It is perhaps comfortingly, in this lull of late modern calendar calm, sometime in the 20th century, that the great empires of time finally sheathed their rulers and compasses. Most nations had adopted the Gregorian calendar by now, not because it was perfect, but because it was fussy in just the right ways. Leap years accounted for the slippage in our 365 and a quarter days voyage around the sun. Centuries were counted with ceremonial pomp or mild grumpiness, depending on the weather. And the world, it seemed, had come to an unspoken agreement. This is as tidy as time needs to be. Thank you very much. To arrive at this moment, minds of immense curiosity had given chase to the sun and moon for millennia. They'd advised emperors, charted the stars, arrested time in ink, and once postponed New Year's Day for 11 entire days, just to align with the Pope's math. And let's not forget the humble peasants and puzzled merchants who simply woke up one morning having skipped from September 2nd to September 14th and had to wonder if they'd overslept magnificently or just been pranked by the cosmos. Now, calendars lie quietly on desks, sleepy in their usefulness. Digital ones blink gently in pockets, reminding us when to water the plants, attend virtual meetings, and send Aunt Marjorie a birthday wish 3 days late, again. Of course, humanity did what humanity does best. It went a little too far. Atomic clocks, now ticking in whispery quantum perfection, keep time so precisely that they only lose a second every 100 million years, longer than most civilizations, houseplants, or celebrity marriages. We even began scheduling leap seconds, tiny tacks hammered into the spinning top of Earth to keep all our astronomical ducklings in a row. But like all things involving precision and bureaucracy, leap seconds stirred their own kind of chaos. Some software panicked, planes paused, and artificial intelligences briefly muttered, "Oh, come on." Still, we prevail. Our calendars, paper or pixelated, still host birthdays, solstices, burrito festivals, and tax deadlines with stoic grace. The chaos of ancient months has given way to neatly ordered life, though you'll be pleased to know that even now, some scholars still squint suspiciously at the calendar and wonder if we've gotten it right. It's rather charming, really, that thousands of years after the Babylonians counted moons on clay, we're still arguing about daylight saving time. But this is where time softens. Right here, with you, at the edge of the timeline where history can finally close its heavy eyes and breathe. The wars of dates are over for now. Today and tomorrow shake hands peacefully. January sighs. February naps. March puts on a cardigan and hums a lullaby. and the rest of the months shuffle off stage in bunny slippers. Time itself has relaxed into its favorite armchair, perhaps with a book in its lap and a cat it refuses to admit it loves curled fast asleep on its knee. And you, dear passenger on this winding journey of calendars, popes, peasants, emperors, and equinoxes, have made it to the stillness at the end of the tale. You now know that the thing we call time is not a tyrant drawn in Roman numerals, but a patient friend who's been rescheduled, rewritten, mispronounced, and dropped behind the couch more than once. Still, it stayed. So as the ticking slows and the historical dust settles, know that you are right where you belong, in this gentle hour nestled between the spaces where clocks dare not intrude. Close your eyes, let the centuries fold away, and drift, softly, into the dream where time, calendars, and your thoughts all agree to sleep